Picture this, you're standing at a crossroads defined not by dust and dirt, but by despair. To your left lies a gilded cage. A marriage to Mayor Silas Blackwood, the most powerful man in the desolate town of Redemption. He is a man whose smile is a crack in a frozen pond, whose touch promises a winter that will never end. He holds the deed to your father's grave, a debt he intends to collect in flesh. He calls it a union, but you know it is an ownership. To your left, a life of cold comfort and silent screams. To your right, nothing. A vast, unforgiving expanse of prairie that has swallowed stronger souls than yours. To run is to choose starvation, the circling vultures, the biting frost. It is to choose a death of chance over a death of certainty. But there is a third path, a whisper on the wind. A story told in hushed tones by the town's women when their husbands are out of earshot. A story of the Thorn Ranch, miles from Redemption's suffocating grip, and of the rancher's son, Caleb. A man broken by tragedy, a cripple hidden away from the world. A man so undesirable that not a single mail-order bride would have him. They say he is a monster of bitterness and shadow. For you, Ilara, an outcast with nothing left to lose, that shadow sounds like a sanctuary. So what do you choose? The gilded cage, the open grave of the prairie, or the monster in the dark? For you, the choice is no choice at all. You run. The storm that broke over the plains that night was a mirror to the tempest in Ilara's soul. Rain fell in punishing sheets, turning the dirt road, leaving Redemption into a river of mud that sucked at her worn boots. Each clap of thunder was a gunshot, the imagined sound of Mayor Blackwood's men coming for her. She had nothing but the thin cotton dress on her back and a small bundle containing a loaf of stolen bread, a water skin, and a tattered book of poems, the last relic of her mother. Her mother, whose foreign accent and knowledge of herbs had marked them both as outsiders from the day they arrived. Her father, a good man broken by debt and dust, had followed her mother to the grave a year later, leaving Ilara utterly alone, a solitary weed in Blackwood's meticulously curated garden of power. Now she was his, a piece of property to be claimed. The thought gave her legs a strength she didn't know they possessed. She ran, not toward a promise, but away from a verdict. By the second day, the sun was a merciless hammer. Her water was gone, the bread a dry memory. The world shimmered and warped before her eyes. The whispered directions: follow the Hawk's Peak until it touches the setting sun, then head for the solitary cottonwood, seemed like a fever dream. She stumbled on, driven by a primal will to live, a refusal to be owned. When she finally saw the sprawling fences of the Thorn Ranch, they seemed a mirage. She collapsed against a rough-hewn post, her consciousness fraying like old rope. The last thing she saw was a figure on the horizon, a man leading a horse, his form stark against the bleeding sky. She awoke to the scent of beef broth and wood smoke. She was lying in a simple bed, a heavy quilt tucked around her. An old woman with a face like a weathered map and kind, tired eyes was dabbing her forehead with a cool cloth. A man stood in the doorway, immense and solid as an oak tree. His face was a mask of stoicism, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't name. It wasn't pity. It was assessment. This was Elias Thorne, the patriarch, a man whose reputation for fairness was as wide as his land. "You're on my property, girl," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Running from something, or to something?" Ilara pushed herself up, her head swimming. "From," she whispered, her throat raw.
"Mayor Blackwood."
He claims I owe him my father's debt." Elias's expression hardened. He knew of Blackwood. He knew the man's rot. "There are some debts that should never be paid," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You can rest here, earn your keep. But I need to know why you came all this way. Why my ranch?" Ilara took a breath, the truth a heavy stone in her chest. I heard about your son." A silence fell over the room, thick and uncomfortable. Even the kindly woman, who introduced herself as Martha, the housekeeper, stilled her hand. Elias's face became unreadable. "My son is my own concern." "I know," Ilara said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "They say, no woman will have him. They call him a cripple. An outcast." She met the rancher's hard gaze. "So am I. I have nothing. I own nothing. I am worth nothing to anyone but a man who wants to use me. Maybe two people with nothing could make something." Elias Thorne stared at her for a long, heavy moment. He saw no cunning in her eyes, only a desperate, bone-deep honesty. He saw a survivor. He had tried for 2 years to find a wife for Caleb, a companion to pull him from the dark pit he'd fallen into after the accident. Every woman had seen the limp, the scarred leg, and the deeper scars on his soul, and they had fled. This girl wasn't fleeing. She was running to it. He gave a single, curt nod. "Martha will see to you. We'll talk again when you have your strength." Her introduction to Caleb Thorne was not a meeting but a collision. After 3 days of rest and food, feeling human again, Alara was helping Martha hang laundry in the yard. A figure emerged from the barn, and her breath caught. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a shock of dark hair that fell over his brow. But his movement was what held her gaze. He walked with a profound limp, his right leg dragging slightly, his weight supported by a thick, hand-carved cane of dark oak. A long, thin scar, white against his tanned skin, ran from his temple down to the hard line of his jaw. He moved with a coiled tension, a man at war with his own body. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, found hers, and they were filled with a hostile fire. "Another one?" he bit out, his voice laced with a bitterness so sharp it could cut. He wasn't speaking to her, but to the world at large. "Did my father put an ad in the paper? Broken man needs a keeper. Pity a prerequisite." Alara felt a flush of anger rise, hot and surprising. She dropped the sheet she was holding. "I am not here out of pity," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am here out of necessity. My own, not yours." His eyes narrowed, taking her in for the first time. He saw the defiant tilt of her chin, the resilience in her gaze that spoke of her own hardships. He saw she wasn't some soft-handed city girl looking for a meal ticket. She was as weathered as he was, just in different ways. He said nothing more, just turned and limped toward the small, isolated cabin that stood 100 yards from the main house. His cabin, his exile. Martha sighed, picking up the fallen sheet. "Don't mind him, dear. The world took a lot from that boy. He's forgotten how to let anyone give anything back." The days that followed were a study in silence and distance. Alara worked tirelessly, proving her worth. She mucked stalls, tended the vegetable garden with a knowledge that surprised Martha, and mended clothes by the firelight late into the night. She never approached Caleb's cabin. She gave him the space he so clearly craved. But she watched him. She saw him in the early mornings, exercising his mangled leg with gritted teeth and a face slick with sweat, his frustration a palpable thing. She saw the way his powerful hands, so at odds with his broken gait, could gentle the most skittish colt. And she saw the small, intricate carvings that began to appear on the porch rail of the main house. A tiny, perfect wolf with its head thrown back in a silent howl. A hawk with its wings spread, every feather detailed. They were beautiful, filled with a life and freedom that their creator seemed to deny himself. Her chance came one evening when a chill wind blew down from the mountains. Elias had ridden out to check on a distant herd, and Martha was down with a fever. Alara was alone in the main house. She saw the light in Caleb's cabin window and, on impulse, poured a mug of hot coffee and carried it out, her heart a nervous drum against her ribs. The wind whipped her dress around her legs as she knocked on his door. It opened a crack. He stared at her, his face shadowed. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone flat. "I brought you coffee," she said simply, holding out the mug. "It's a cold night." He looked from the mug to her face, suspicion warring with something else in his eyes. He opened the door wider and took the mug, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was like a spark on dry tinder. He didn't invite her in, but he didn't close the door either. She glanced past him into the small cabin. It was sparse, clean, and filled with wood. Shavings littered the floor around a single chair, and on a long workbench against the far wall sat a menagerie of wooden creatures. A whole forest, a whole prairie, carved with breathtaking skill. Her eyes landed on an unfinished piece. A stallion, its muscles bunched, rearing in defiance, its spirit captured in the grain of the wood. "Your carvings," she said, her voice barely a whisper. There, alive, he looked back at the workbench, a flicker of something, pride, pain, crossing his features. "There just would no," she insisted, stepping just inside the doorway, out of the wind's bite. "They are what you can't say." He turned back to her, his stormy eyes searching hers. The ever-present wall of his bitterness seemed to have a small crack in it. "And what is it you don't say, Alara, the outcast from Redemption?" She met his gaze without flinching. "That I'm afraid," she admitted, the words tasting strange and true on her tongue. "And that I'm tired of running. And that I would rather be in a room with a man everyone calls a monster than in a house with a man everyone calls a mayor." That night, something shifted. The silence between them began to change its shape, from a wall of hostility to a space of cautious curiosity. He started leaving his cabin door open in the evenings. She would bring him his supper, and sometimes she would stay, sitting on a stool near the fire while he worked. The only sounds the scrape of his knife on wood and the crackle of the flames. They spoke at first of practical things. The weather, the livestock, the garden. Then, slowly, tentatively, they spoke of other things. He asked about the book she read every night. She told him it was her mother's, filled with poems of a land across the sea. She read one to him, her voice soft in the quiet cabin, and he listened, his hands still for the first time. He told her about the stampede. He didn't speak of the pain or the long, agonizing recovery. He spoke of the sound, the thunder of 1,000 hooves, the snapping of bone. He spoke of the betrayal he felt, that the land he loved, the animals he had raised, could turn on him with such brutal indifference. He never mentioned how it started. He never mentioned the strange, cut fence wire or the unfamiliar brand he'd seen on a dead steer afterward. It was a secret he kept locked away, a poison he drank alone. One afternoon, she found him by the creek, trying to fish. His leg was stiff and he struggled to keep his balance on the slick rocks. He cursed, his face a mask of fury and shame, as his cane slipped and he nearly fell. Alara didn't rush to help him. She didn't offer a hand or utter a single word of pity. Instead, she walked a few yards downstream, gathered several flat, sturdy stones, and began building a small, level platform at the water's edge. She worked silently, methodically. When she was done, she simply looked at him. He stared at her, then at the platform she had built. A complex series of emotions played across his face. He limped over, tested the stones with his boot, and found them solid. He stood on the platform, steady and balanced for the first time, and cast his line into the water. He didn't thank her, not with words, but as he stood there, his shoulders seemed to lose some of their tension. He was not a cripple being helped. He was a man being met where he was. That evening, he presented her with a carving. It was a small, delicate bluebird, its head cocked as if listening. "For your garden," he said gruffly, pressing it into her hand. To scare away the crows, her fingers closed around the smooth, warm wood. It was the first gift she had received in years. It was more precious than gold. "Thank you, Caleb," she whispered. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, the storm in them had parted, revealing a glimpse of a clear, quiet sky. His father, Elias, watched them from the porch of the main house, a slow, hopeful smile touching his lips for the first time in a long, long while. The slow burn of trust was kindling into a gentle flame. They were two broken pieces, scarred and discarded by the world, who were beginning to realize that, together, they might just fit. They were beginning to form a shape that looked a lot like hope. But redemption had a long memory, and Silas Blackwood was not a man who took kindly to being denied what he considered his. The peace of the Thorn Ranch was a fragile thing, and the shadow of the past was stretching long and dark across the plains, coming for them. The arrival of Silas Blackwood felt like a sudden, sickening drop in temperature. He didn't come with guns blazing. He came with the thin, brittle authority of the law. He rode up to the Thorn Ranch in a polished black buggy, the town's reluctant sheriff, a man named Miller, riding beside him. Alara was weeding the garden when she saw the dust cloud. Her blood ran cold. She straightened up, her hand instinctively going to the small bluebird carving that now sat perched on a fence post, a silent guardian. Caleb emerged from his cabin, his cane held tight in his hand, his face a thunderous mask. Elias Thorne met them on the porch, his stance as immovable as the mountains behind him. "Blackwood," Elias greeted, his voice flat and devoid of welcome. "This is private land. State your business and be gone." Blackwood stepped down from the buggy, smoothing his fine wool coat. His smile was a predator's baring of teeth. "My business is with my property, Thorne. A runaway piece of property, to be precise." His cold eyes landed on Alara, and a possessive sneer twisted his lips. "Alara, my dear, did you really think you could hide from me? She is not your property." Caleb's voice cut through the air, low and dangerous. He had moved to stand beside his father, his limp seeming to vanish in the face of his cold fury. Alara walked over to stand with them, her fear a hard knot in her stomach, but her resolve a steel rod at her back. She would not cower. Blackwood chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Oh, but she is. And I have the proof." He produced a document from his coat pocket, waving it like a victory flag. A marriage contract, signed by her dear, departed father as collateral on his debts. All perfectly legal. "She belongs to me. Sheriff Miller is here to enforce it." Sheriff Miller looked deeply uncomfortable. He was a decent man trapped in a corrupt man's web. "Elias, my hands are tied. The paper looks legal." Elias Thorne took a step forward, his shadow falling over the mayor. "That paper is an obscenity. It's the scrawl of a desperate man, coerced by a vulture. It means nothing here." "It means everything," Blackwood countered, his voice rising. "She is my betrothed, my wife in the eyes of the law, and you are harboring her. I could have you arrested for theft." The air grew thick with unspoken violence. The ranch hands had begun to gather, their faces grim, their hands resting near tools that could easily become weapons. Blackwood saw the shift. He was a bully, not a fool. He didn't want to fight with the entire Thorne outfit, not yet. "I am a reasonable man," he said, his tone shifting to one of magnanimous poison. "I will not cause a scene today. You have until sundown tomorrow. Bring the girl to town, and we will forget this unpleasantness. If she is not there," he let the threat hang in the air, "Sheriff Miller will be authorized to deputize a posse. We will come back and we will take her. The law will be on our side." He climbed back into his buggy, his eyes locking with Alara's one last time. "I look forward to our wedding night, my dear." The buggy turned, and with a cloud of dust and the clatter of hooves, the threat departed, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. Despair descended on the ranch. Elias paced the porch, his face carved with grim lines. Martha wept silently in the kitchen. The contract, fraudulent in spirit, was likely ironclad in the twisted legal world Blackwood controlled. To fight was to invite a bloodbath on their doorstep. To surrender Alara was unthinkable. She sat on the porch steps, staring sightlessly at the horizon, the world she had briefly found feeling like it was dissolving into sand between her fingers. Caleb had retreated into his cabin, the door shut tight. The silence from that small building was heavier than any shout. Alara felt a hollowness spread through her chest. She thought he had abandoned her, retreating back into his shell of bitterness, leaving her to face her fate alone. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky in strokes of fire and sorrow, she steeled herself. She would not let these good people die for her. She would slip away in the night. She would face Blackwood. Just as she rose to her feet, the door to Caleb's cabin creaked open. He emerged, and he was not the same man who had entered. He carried his cane, but his shoulders were squared. His chin was up, and the storm in his eyes was not one of self-pity, but of righteous, focused rage. He held something in his other hand. He walked directly to his father. "We are not giving her up," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "Son, the law—" Elias began, his voice weary. "The law is a tool." Caleb cut him off. "And Blackwood has been using it as a weapon against us for years. It's time we showed him what a tool can do in the right hands." He turned to Alara, and his eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "You are not his. You are not a debt. You are one of us. You are family." The word hung in the air, beautiful and shocking. "I won't let him take you." He looked back at his father. "Do you remember the stampede? The one that took my leg?" Elias nodded grimly. "I remember." "It wasn't an accident," Caleb said, his voice ringing with a conviction that sent a chill down Alara's spine. "Blackwood's ambitions have always been bigger than his own property. He wanted our water rights. He tried to buy you out and you refused. A week later, our herd stampeded. I was mending a fence on the north pasture. I saw it start, a rider deliberately spooking the lead steer. And when the dust settled, I found this." He opened his hand. Lying on his palm was a small, twisted piece of metal. A custom-made silver spur, fashioned in the shape of a coiled snake. "I've seen this spur before," Caleb said, his gaze hard as flint. "On Blackwood's boot, every Sunday at church. He thinks it makes him look distinguished." He then pulled a folded piece of leather from his pocket. "And this, a piece of a saddlebag, torn off on the fence wire. It has the Blackwood brand on it." Elias Thorne stared at the evidence, his face ashen. Why didn't you say anything, son?" Caleb's gaze dropped for a moment, the old pain surfacing. "Because I was ashamed. I was broken. I felt like a failure who let his father's herd get destroyed. I thought no one would believe a cripple's word against a mayor's. So I kept it. I let the bitterness fester. But no more." He looked up, his eyes clear and resolved. "He didn't just take my leg that day. He took my voice. And I'm taking it back." The next day, as the sun reached its zenith, the thorn buggy rolled into the town of Redemption. But it wasn't Alara being delivered. It was Caleb, Elias, and Alara, sitting together, a united front. They didn't go to the mayor's office. They went straight to the sheriff's. Blackwood was already there, gloating, a smug look on his face.
"Ah, Thorne.
Come to your senses, have you? Where is the girl?" "She is right here," Elias said, as Alara stepped forward, flanked by the two men. "And she is not going anywhere with you." Caleb stepped in front of Blackwood, holding out the silver spur. "Does this look familiar, Mayor?" Blackwood's face went pale. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he masked it with bluster. "It's a spur. What of it?" "It was found in our north pasture 2 years ago," Caleb said, his voice carrying through the small office. "The day of the stampede. The day you tried to cripple my father's ranch. The day you crippled me." He threw the branded piece of leather on the sheriff's desk. Along with this, Sheriff Miller picked up the leather, his eyes widening as he saw the brand. He looked from the evidence to Blackwood's terrified face, and years of suppressed doubt and suspicion clicked into place. He saw the truth. "This is slander. Lies." Blackwood blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No one will believe the word of a bitter cripple." "I believe him." Alara's voice rang out, clear and strong. She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she faced her tormentor. "And I believe a man who would use a father's grief to purchase his daughter is capable of anything." She turned to the sheriff. "You have a choice, Sheriff Miller. You can uphold the law of a man like this, a man who uses paper and power to steal and to maim. Or you can stand for justice." The sheriff looked at the evidence. He looked at Blackwood, sweating and exposed. And he looked at the 3 figures standing united before him, the stern patriarch, the defiant outcast, and the son who was no longer broken. He made his choice. "Silas," he said, his voice heavy, "this contract is void. There are irregularities. And we are going to have a long talk about a 2-year-old stampede." Blackwood stared, his empire of fear crumbling around him. He saw the faces in the window, townspeople who had heard the commotion, their expressions turning from fear to contempt. His power was gone. With a snarl of pure hatred, he turned and stormed out of the office, a king with no kingdom. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was a comfortable, peaceful silence. The weight of the world had been lifted. As they pulled up to the house, Martha ran out, her face streaked with tears of relief. That night, for the first time, they all ate supper together in the main house. Caleb sat not in the corner, but at the table with Alara beside him. He looked at her, the woman who had come with nothing and had somehow given him everything back. He had spent years seeing himself as half a man, but she had never seen him that way. She had seen his strength, his art, his heart, and in her eyes he finally saw it too. Later, on the porch, as a blanket of stars emerged in the vast, dark sky, he pressed a new carving into her hand. It was of two wolves, standing side by side on a rocky outcrop, their faces turned toward the same horizon. Equals, partners, pack of two. I was wrong, he said softly, his hand covering hers. About what? She asked. I thought my life ended in that stampede, he said, his gaze meeting hers, open and vulnerable. But I was wrong. It was just waiting for you. So I have to ask you, what truly makes a person whole? Is it a body that has never been scarred? A life that has never known hardship? Or is it the courage to stand up after you have been broken, and to offer your strength to someone else who is stumbling? We so often look for perfection, for lives untouched by pain, but perhaps the truest connections are forged in the cracks. Perhaps true family isn't something you're born into, but something you build, piece by broken piece, with the people who see you for who you are, not for the scars you carry. What do you think? Is the greatest strength found in avoiding the fall, or in the way we rise? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of redemption and love touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the enduring power of the human spirit.